Great. So, good afternoon, everyone. We have another session here by SUG Bangalore, hosted by SUG Bangalore. And Bharath is going to be taking us over data exchange framework and also creating a custom provider. So, thank you, everyone who has joined. And Bharath, over to you.
Thank you very much, Annie. Hi, everyone. Today's topic for the presentation is data exchange framework. This is the agenda of the presentation. First, we'll have introduction about data exchange framework, then the installation of data exchange framework package and Sitecore provider package, creating a custom provider. For today, we'll be creating a custom provider for Excel document, configuration, and the demo. Um, so, what is data exchange framework? Data exchange framework, it's a framework which is used to transfer data between two systems. Here, either of the system can be Sitecore, like the systems from which data has been read is the source system, and the system to which data is written is called the target system. Sitecore can act as either source or the target, and it's not mandatory that Sitecore has to be either source or a target. Like data exchange framework can work without Sitecore, like Sitecore as a target or a source. So it can be used to transfer data between any two systems. So to connect with the different systems, data exchange framework uses uh, providers. Like providers helps us to interact with the different systems like Sitecore, file system, Excel, and any system. So in this demo, we'll be concentrating more about creating a provider for a particular file system, and then like implementing it. How do we configure the created provider and use the data exchange framework? So for the installation, the versions which I've used is like Sitecore 8.2 initial release, data exchange framework and Sitecore provider 1.3, and the Visual Studio 4.5.2. For the data exchange framework provider, for the data exchange framework package and the Sitecore provider package are available in the below link. It's in the marketplace. Here we can download the files and like install the packages. This the versions which I'm using right now is 1.3, and but the latest version in the market is like the 1.4. Since I have not tested the 1.4, I'm giving a demo with 1.3 itself today. So for time being, like I have already downloaded the files, and I'll show the installation now. So in the home developer tools, installation wizard, mm, I'll upload the packages. Data exchange framework and the Sitecore provider for the data exchange framework. So this is how I upload the files, and then installation of the packages. Before installing any providers, first we have to install the data exchange framework. That's a rule, or else the other providers won't get installed properly. Mm. The installation of data exchange framework package takes a couple of minutes. Like it takes time. Mm. Mm. Yeah, it's normal. Like it takes time. Like the installation actually takes time. Nothing can be done. Sitecore. Hmm. Only the data action framework, like the whole this package takes time. The rest, like the provider and all, doesn't take much time. Yeah, we are done with this. So once we are done installing, we can cross verify it here in the content editor. Under system, I'll have my data exchange here. Data exchange, like I have a component called data exchange over here. So we are done with this. Right now, I'll be installing the Sitecore provider. Basically, the provider here we are using is like for the data exchange framework to interact with the Sitecore. I'm using this provider. And in my whole demo, like today, I'll be what I'll be doing is like I'll be reading the data from my Excel file of format of like this. Like I have made it like some employee details or something like that. I'll be reading these fields and I'll be creating an items in the Sitecore with respect to that fields. So that is the whole agenda of the like provider what we'll be creating right now. Mm, yes, we are done with this. Okay, so we are done with the installation. And the next one is like the defining the requirements. So each and every like source or the target will have some requirements, like each of every provider which will be working or like in future which will be creating will have its own requirement. For example, in my file it's like this is the Excel file which I'll be reading now. In this file my requirements are like it has first line contains the header of the fields which I'll be adding. And like I can also mention like from which Excel sheet I'll be reading it. So here like am I reading from the first sheet or the reading from the second sheet, whichever. I can do that depending on the file system or depending on the system which you will be using. You can actually define your requirement. For example, if you are using a text file, you can actually define like the column separators, like how do you bifurcate, is it by tab or like by using a comma separated values or something like that, anything. You can define your requirement. So once we are done with creating defining the requirement, the next step is to like creating a Visual Studio project. And actually today I'll be going through the steps to create a provider for data action framework. Since like creating a data action framework provider takes a bit more time. So I'll be showing you the steps. So the Visual Studio have actually created the project in the Visual Studio have actually been created. So for this Visual Studio project, I'm using like a class library template and of the framework like 4.5.2, and the name you can give the depending upon the system which you'll be using. And also once created the project, like you have to add these many references: Sitecore data exchange, Sitecore data exchange.data access, Sitecore services.core. These are the mandatory 3 references that has to be added in your Visual Studio project. And since I'm working with Microsoft Excel, I'm adding this one more reference called Microsoft Excel 16.0 object library. So I'll show you the references over here. Here I have added the Sitecore data exchange, data access, services.core, and this is my Microsoft Office Excel references which I've added. Next, coming to creating the custom provider. Like basically creating a custom provider is of creating 3 major components, that is endpoint, pipeline step, and the value accessor. So what is this? What is this endpoint pipeline step and the value accessor? Endpoint is something like which defines your end file attributes. Like endpoint can be like source endpoint or target endpoint. So since I'm using my provider as a source, so that is like I'm reading data from my Excel. So this is my source endpoint. This will be my source endpoint, and here I'll be defining the attributes of my source file, like which we created previously, like my um, worksheet number. My first line is the header, something like that, and the path of the worksheet where I have kept like where my file is located in. So this is the place I do that. And in the pipeline step, here I'll read the actual data. Using this, here in this place we'll be writing my logic to read the data from the Excel file. And the value accessor is a component that associates value reader with the value accessor. For example, like I can show you like this. Like I have three fields over here: ID, first name, and the last name. So how does my data exchange framework get to know that where is my ID situated in, or like where is my first name situated? So here using this value accessor, I can define that like my ID is in my first row. Here I'm using the integer based mapping. So I can define that my ID is in the first column and my first name is in the second position and my last name in the third position. Similarly, while writing into the target, like we can, the value accessor helps us to define the place where the item has to be, or else the value has to be loaded to. For example, in my template, I'll be having to write these values in Sitecore. I'll be creating a template containing fields for ID, first name, and the last name. But how does data action framework will get to know where my ID should be written and where my first name has to be written? So that can be done using the help of the value accessor here. So let's start creating a provider. First step is to create a endpoint. All the three, like creating endpoint, pipeline step, and value accessor, most of them has common steps. Like for the endpoint, I'll be explaining in the detail, and rest two will be I'll just show the key components of the pipeline step and the data access. Like both are like almost same. So to first thing is like I'm just to adding a endpoint folder. Sorry, adding a template folder in data exchange. So I'll just show here. So under templates, data exchange, providers. Here I have added a folder called Excel provider. So yeah, under this, all the components with respect to my Excel provider will be created, all the templates basically. So the first step is like adding an endpoint template. So under Excel provider, have added a folder called endpoints, and in endpoints have created a template called Excel endpoint of the base template type templates data exchange framework endpoint. Like here I have my base template, like in the under data exchange framework endpoints. This is my base template which I've used for creating the endpoint template over here. And also after creating the endpoint, I'll be adding the required fields now here. So for me, the required fields are like the path, like from where my data has to be read, worksheet, and the column header is the first line. So this is what my requirements are, like the attributes for my system which I'll be using. And for the best practice, since the data action framework which we create or like which will be created will be used by many number of peoples, it is recommended that the icons what we used should be standard. So for example, for the endpoint, I have used an icon like a cloud icon. Basically, like you can get to know for what icon has to be used for which template in the base templates which you will be using. Like for example, for the endpoint like this, and for the pipelines, I'll be using the icons like this. So it's recommended that we use the same icon so that person who is using your framework won't be having problem in recognizing the items. So it will be easy for them to recognize item depending on the icons which we have provided. Our next step is to implement the endpoint settings plugin and endpoint extensions in the Visual Studio. Okay, what is this plugin and why are we using this? So plugin is used to store the Sitecore settings. So I have created a plugin over here. So this is used to store the Sitecore settings. What actually happens here is the converter actually instantiates the plugin and sets the value to the plugin. Like it sets the values over here. What is the value for the column header in the first line? What is the value for the worksheet in the path over here? So it sets the values and then it adds the plugin to the endpoint. This is how the stuff works. So right now here I have given my plugin over here, and to make sure that this plugin can be accessed easier, I have written an extension. This extension file it's just to make sure that the plugin can be accessed easily. It's like if it checks like if it has an extension and like it returns the file to the endpoint. So next step, when the spaces in the field names are I didn't just want. It's my WebEx. What happens when there are spaces in the field names for those properties? Field names in the sense, is it like in the Excel file or on the data template? Just a moment. You're seeing here like path space, something like this.
Yeah, so basically, I'm assuming that these wire up to the properties in that class. So what happens if there are spaces in the field names? Does it work magically, or do you have to have them without spaces?
Yeah, that is better. Like if we don't have spaces over here, and moreover, like since it's a template, here it's like while defining here, it can be a problem. Like in the just a moment. In the plugins I'll be adding just a moment.
Okay.
So here I'm giving this I'm using a class to map the fields over here. So if you think that there is a space over here in the path, I guess it won't take here, like since the constant which I'm adding over here, the model for the converter, it is without space. It's recommended that we don't use any spaces or something like that.
Okay.
It's a best practice.
Bharath, perhaps you can test it once after you're done with the demo. You can try testing it with an underscore or something and see. I mean, some of these things are coded that way. So
yeah, sure. I'll check this. So once we are done creating the endpoint plugin and the endpoint extensions, the next step is like creating a model. Like we're using this model to define the constants for the names of the fields from the endpoint template. Like here I'll be defining the constants, like which fields I'll be using from my template field. So that is done in this class file. And then I'll be creating a converter here. So this is my converter code. What it happens here is as I mentioned earlier, it instantiates the plugin, like it creates an object of the type plugin, and it sets the value over here from the model. It receives the values from the model, like Excel file endpoint item model, Excel file endpoint item model. It receives the values from here, and it sets the values for each and every item, like each and every object. And then once it's done, and it adds this plugin to the endpoint. Like here I'm adding it like in the settings. I'm sending this object plugin to the endpoint. So and also I've used
Bharath? Sorry, Annie here. On your right side bottom corner of the window, I think there's the chat window or something open. Can you close that,
Oh,
please?
sorry.
Thank
Oh,
you.
sorry. Mm. And this is the template ID of which, okay, this is the template ID of which we created right now. Okay, I'm giving the template ID of this, like 166. Like this is the template ID, and this is like this to make sure that this part of code is like just to make sure that uh, like the items for the conversion will should be based on this particular template, so that no other items will be like given for the converter or something like that. So once we are done with this, once we are done with creating a template and the converter, the next step is to like add the standard values. So in Excel endpoint template and in the standard values, I just don't want to say that. In the standard values, I can give my standard values over here. Like for default, I have given my worksheet number as one, and have ticked. I make sure that the column header is in the first line. And also in the converter type, I have to give the reference of the class file which we created right now for the endpoint converter. Mm, like that is nothing but like I'm giving this the namespace over here with the class like demo.excel.converters endpoint, Excel endpoint converter, and then with the project name, or like the name of the. So once we are done with this, the next step is like adding the endpoints to the tenant. Like this is something like to make sure that the user who is using a provider will don't have any difficulties in defining like what is the endpoint and where it has to be added or something like that. So in this, like we'll make sure that the endpoints will be added in under particular route or something like that. So how do we do this? Like for this, I've created a folder and a template called Excel endpoint root. So, and also this is inherited from the data action framework folders for endpoints, folders for the endpoints. Like using this base template, I have created this template, and then in standard values of this, I have added the my Excel endpoint template which I created earlier. So I have added these template in the standard values over here. Configure, assign. So it's available the Excel endpoint over here. And then the next thing is like here I'll be creating a command, so that to make sure that uh, here I'll be creating a command called as like create item without prompting for the name of the branch. There's like once we try to create an item, we can make sure that we can predefine the name of the file which has been created. So for this, like I have created a command called Excel endpoint root. Here in the new item settings, like I can define the name of the folder which will be created and the template of the folder that will be created. In this path, I have given the template of this um, Excel endpoint root. So this, okay. So items of this type will be created when I execute this. Okay, how do I execute this? For this, what we are doing is like we are writing a rule over here under systems, settings, rules, insert options. Here we have like insert options rules. So we can define our own rule. So what I've done is like I have defined a rule over here. Like this is my endpoint provider route. Okay, for the demo purpose, I'll be creating a rule over here now. What I have to do, I have to add a specific insert option. Okay, what will be in my insert option? Okay, here in my insert option, what I have to add, I have to add a command of this, like commands. I'm taking this. Have to add this Excel endpoint root, like without prompting a name of for the thing, and where I have to add, where the item template is specific template. So this is like where I have to add it, like here for this framework folders, folders for endpoint providers root. So my template will be added under this, like under this folder, and then like I'm adding one more rule here, where the result of the expression query exists. They're not actually. This is like something like, I'll show just a moment. Okay, this is like except where the ID which I have given here is the ID of the template folder which we created earlier. So this is to make sure that the duplicate, there will be no duplicate or like redundant, like duplicate folders will not be added. Just to make sure that the duplicate folders will not be added. So once we are done with this, we have to click OK and save this, and this query will be saved here. To show this, like to verify this, I'll just create a, okay, I'll just show you how to create a, this one. So let's verify how it is. I'll make it as test itself. Okay. This is how we create a tenant over here. Once done, if we go to endpoints and providers, here we can find the Excel endpoint root. So this is nothing but the thing which we have given here, Excel endpoint. So Excel endpoint root, and here, like if you see, it went off, like we can't create one more Excel endpoint root over here. So it's done. If I delete this, I'll again have an option. So just to make sure that, like in that query we have given, right, like where not the, except where the template ID, this template ID exists, we can, that like Sitecore can allow us to create a template of particular kind. This is how we add a endpoint. So ability to add endpoints. So we are done with this. Creating a road, adding insert option for the command template. So now we are done with creating the endpoint. The next step is like to implement a pipeline step. So this is much similar to the okay, this is much similar as we created the endpoints. So here I'll be creating a pipeline step template, and here I'll be giving a field called endpoint from. So here what I'll be basically here is like this pipeline step is to read my Excel data. So for that, it has to reading a data, it should have an endpoint from where it has to read. So I have given a place called endpoint from over here, and the of type drop tree. And this is the folder type, like just to make sure that like in the drop list we will get the item of this particular template ID or something like that. So once after creating this, we have to create a model and the converter for this. So this is the model. Here, since there is only one field in my template, I'm using this. Like, so in the converter, It's again same as like converting the how we converted the endpoint file. Here it again we are taking a plugin and like instantiating it, and like we are checking like is it valid, or like if it is not null or something like that. And here in this place we are giving a template ID of the template and pipeline template which we created earlier. Like here this template ID will be giving here. And also once we are done with creating a converter, the next step is to like creating a processor. So processor is something where we have to write our logic. So basically initially I'm doing some null check, like to make sure that my endpoint is not null and the pipeline step is not null in the pipeline context involved. And then this is the code which I've used to read the Excel file. I'll be reading the Excel file like by trading rows and columns, by taking the ranges. And then once after reading the files, I'll be adding it to the pipeline context plugin, like using the function called iterable data settings. And this is like system with the help of this function. Like I got this function with like by extending my class to the base read data step processor. So after once I'm done, like I'll be adding it to the context, pipeline context. And after creating here, like this is the place where the most of the efforts for writing the code goes to. Like for me, it's like reading Excel data over here, and like if it is for a different system, your own code sits here. The rest all will be like almost same comparatively, other than a couple of fields. Like once we are done creating a pipeline step, in the standard values again we have to set the standard values for here. Like here we have to give the references of the converter and the processor which we have created in the Excel, in your Visual Studio for the Excel. After once we are done with this, the next step for us is to create a data access. As I mentioned earlier, data access is used to associate a reader with the writer. Like for example, as I mentioned, like in my Excel file, I'll be representing the fields, like representing the columns with respect to the position of it. Like if it is in the first position or the last position or something like that. So here I have created a field called position of the type integer. And for that, similarly, as we created for endpoint and the pipeline step, we have to create a model and the converter. And then the ID over here is corresponds to the template ID which we created for the value accessor. Once we are done, again we have to give the converter type, like the references of that. Basically the thing is like if we see our, like for example our Excel file itself, like our value accessor is not a single item, it's of multiple items. So to hold all the items, like how creating one more template called array value accessor set. So in this, like again I have both the array value accessor and array value accessor set. I have the base templates which I have used is like for the array value accessor, I have used the base template of value accessor defined by the data action framework itself. And for the array value accessor set, I have used the base template of value accessor set again, which is defined here. So once creating this for the array value accessor set in the standard values, I'm giving a insert options to add a value accessor. So after doing this, like again for inserting it in the tenant, I'm creating a root folder, Excel value accessor set root. And again, I'll be defining the command over here. Like this, the Excel provider as the name, and template is the folder template which we created now in the new template. And again, in the rules, we'll be defining like same as how we did it for the endpoints. Like we are adding array value provider set root which we created in the branch, and like except where the template ID of that folder template which we created, we are adding this array value access set root. And also for the pipelines also, I forgot to say mention here, for the pipelines also we have created a rule like we have to add read Excel file pipeline step as an insert option where the item template is pipeline. So this is nothing but under data exchange framework, we have a template called pipeline. So under that, we have to add our Excel like we have to give option for user to insert. So this is done. So again, if we check over here in data access, array value accessor sets provider, here I have option like Excel value accessor set root. And once I have created this option, like I will not have an option to create it again. So I can do that. I'll delete it for now. So we are done with implementing the data access and this like data accessor set and adding the component here. These are the steps which we use, and here I have given the information like what are the base templates which I have used here. And then coming to the use of provider, like by this, like we are done with creating a provider. So how do we use this? So the first step is like after installation we have to add a tenant. Like I have already added a tenant called test. Once done with this, once after adding the tenant over here, the first thing is like specifying the endpoints, like from where my data has to be read and like where it has to be written. So in the providers I have two options over here. One is the Excel endpoints root, that is like the endpoint which we created right now, and this is the Sitecore endpoint root. Like I got this from installing the Sitecore provider package which we did in the first step. So what I'll be defining Excel endpoint root, giving the Excel endpoint. Here I'll make this as employee details source. Employee detail source, and here I can give the path. Actually I have stored this Excel file over here, so I'm giving the path of it. Along with the file name, and here you can use anything like worksheet number. I can change like 1, 2, 3, any number. As right now I'll make it as 2. I'll be saving it. Once I'm done with this, I'll have to create a provider for my Sitecore. For this I'll be using like Sitecore item model repository endpoint. Here I'll make it as employee target. Here there are no options for me to specify, like it's everything is handled in the Sitecore provider which they have given for this. So once we are done with this, the next step is like defining the value accessor, like what all my values are. First one is like Excel value accessor set root, other value accessor set. So here I'll be giving like employee details value accessor set, and my array value accessor is like first thing would be like ID. I'll be defining my what where is my ID, and here I have to specify the position of my ID is located. And if you look into it, like it's like my first field is like I've given my ID in my first position, and then there are no first name, and my first name is in the second position. And here like unless and until you have to specify like particular, like for example for a particular field to uh, what do you call it, to predefine the thing, we will not use this. And my first name is in the second position, and again my last name is in position 3. So we are done with the source. Now we have to define for the target. For this, like before going to it, I'll just show you here in user defined. I have created a template to hold the data, like to create the items of particular field. This template corresponds to the source file. So these templates contain 3 fields like ID, first name, and the last name. So these are the 3 fields. And also I have created in the content home like a place to hold the data. Here I can specify like where my items has to be created. So Sitecore value accessor set root. Here again I'll be selecting this like Sitecore item field value accessor set, like since it's item field, it's not XDB or something like that. It will be like EMP details target. So my first value will be again ID. Here I have to specify the field like where my ID has to be written. So I am giving the field over here. So my ID in the target corresponds to that field, and first name corresponds to the field over here. And similarly the last name. So now we are done with creating the endpoints and creating the value accessors. So like basically we can read our file and we can specify like what fields corresponds to what, like where are our fields are. So next thing is like mapping those two, like mapping our source with the target. So for this I'll be using this. I'll be creating an item for the mapping value mapping set. Here I'll be mentioning like Excel to Sitecore, something like this. So my first value mapping would be ID. So here I have to specify where my source accessor for the ID and where would be the target accessor. Value accessor sets, providers, Excel provider, ID. This is my source accessor, and this is my this will be my target accessor. Providers, Sitecore, employee details, ID. So basically, if we see here, like we can map any like from anywhere to anywhere. There is nothing like, but by defining the accessor, we are actually making it very modular, like so that reusability can be done easily. So So similarly, we have to create a mapping for a first name and the last name. First name, my source is the target will be. So we are done creating the mapping sets. The next step is to like define the pipelines. So we are done with creating our endpoints, the data accessors, and the value mappings. Now like creating a pipeline, what has to be done? So first thing what we'll be do is like since we are reading a multi-line files, first thing which I'll be creating is like option to handle a single row. So I'll just to handle a single row in my source file, I'll be creating this. First thing is like resolve the Sitecore item. Like first thing is like before creating anything, I need to check whether those particular items or like those particular values are already present in my Sitecore or not. So I'll be creating this one, resolve Sitecore item pipeline step. And all these pipeline steps we have got uh, by uh, by installing the Sitecore provider. Other than the couple of pipeline steps like apply mapping pipeline step, iterate data, and only these two will be by default. We'll get these two pipeline step like basically without any provider or something. Like these two pipeline step will be from data exchange framework, and rest all the pipeline steps with respect to the Sitecore. And so in resolve pipeline step, template for the new item, like first thing is like we have to specify which template for we are using to create a new item. So this is the template which I'm using, and the name value accessor, the value accessor used to determine the name of the new item. Like while creating an item, like it has to give a name, right? So which one we can give any of the values. Like for example, you can give a ID or first name or anything. Like your item name would be based on the field which you give over here. So now I'll be giving the first name. Now I'll be giving the first name, and the endpoint is like so. All these three things are all these three things are with respect to um, my Sitecore side. Like to create a item, I'm using this template, and name of the item will be here, and where I have to create the endpoint is like the Sitecore employee details target. So at this endpoint, I'll be creating an item of that particular name. So before creating an item, I have to check whether the item is present there or not. For that, we have to give an identifier. This can be like some any unique column. So right now, I'll be giving ID as since ID most of the time would be unique. I'll be giving the ID of from my source accessor. See from Excel provider, I'm giving my ID to check like it will take the value from Excel file like source. I identify object location is in the source, and object resolution like where will be the result object, like if it is there or not, like where it has to check the result of object resolution location will be my target. So it will read here, it will take the ID, it will check in the target, find the existing item. Okay, for this let me create a new folder. Like I'm creating a folder like to so I'm creating a folder over here. under home and Excel to Sitecore. So there's nothing but I have created this folder to like to make sure that the items which I create will be under this folder. That's it. This is the parent item to for the resolving, and like what it has to check in the Sitecore, like what it has to check. So that is my target accessor. So it has to check the ID in my target over here. So what we have done here is like we have defined a template for the creation and the name for the new item which will be created and where it has to be created in the target, and the identifier to check whether the item is already existing or not. And then where it has to find, like where it has to search to check the existence here, and what it has to check the value over here. These are the steps in the resolve thing. So once it's resolved, the next step it has to do is like apply mapping. So in apply mapping, I have to give the mapping set which we created earlier. Excel to, okay, I have done a spelling mistake. It's Excel to Sitecore. So after this is done, like we have to update it in the Sitecore. So update Sitecore item pipeline step. So endpoint, I'm giving this as the target. So, and basically these pipeline steps has to be in particular order. So you have to make sure that it has to first, it should resolve, then it has to apply mapping, and then it has to update the item in the Sitecore. So we are done with handling a single row. Our next thing is like reading the file. Read Excel in this pipeline step. This is the one which this is the pipeline which we created now, reading the Excel file. So here the only thing which we have to give is like the endpoint from where it has to read. So our endpoint contains all the information about the file which we are reading. So once after this pipeline step, the second pipeline step which we have to give is like iterate data and run pipeline step. So here for iterating data, what it has to do, it's a multi-list. So I'll give an option of handling single row for each and every row. This pipeline step will be executed. And again, so again, this has to be in order. So we are done creating the pipelines for our reading thing. The next thing is like creating a pipeline batch. So why are we doing this? Like pipelines are like, this defines like what has to be done. This defines the order of the steps which has to be taken. Like what it basically does is like, I'll just show you. It's like I'll create a pipeline batch called as Excel to Sitecore pipeline batch, and here what I'll do is like what it has to do. So it has to read an Excel file. I'm saving here. It has to read Excel file. So what it does, it goes here, read Excel. It reads the Excel file pipeline step. This pipeline step will get executed, and then it comes to here. The second one, iterate data, and when it comes to here, it goes to the handle single row pipeline step. So it goes here. So once after reading, first it will try to resolve it. It will check whether the item will be existing or not. Then it will, then the mapping will be applied to it. Then it will be updated to the Sitecore. So each and every row will be updated, iterated and updated. So I have given this to run this pipeline. Like we have to do this for this. Like we have an option for enabling the tenant. So basically this will be disabled. This is to make sure that accidentally the pipeline batch won't get like executed in the middle of the configuration or something. Like if you want to disable the execution, you can disable it so that no junk data or something inappropriate data won't be added to the Sitecore. So if I enable this here, I'll have option to run my pipeline batch over here. So once I click, I'll get this option Excel to SC started. So my batch has been started. If I go here, 5 rows were read from the file, pipeline step, and 5 elements were iterated. Okay, I'll just refresh this. So if I go under here, I'll get this. So the item name is like the first name which I've given. This is the first name. So these are the corresponding items what we have done. 5 items with the 5 first names. And then like if we have to modify the item or something like that, for example, I'll change a value over here. Let's say this. Then again run my pipeline batch. So my item field got updated. It didn't create a new item for me. It updated the thing field over here. So this is how we do. Almost where it's the last section of the presentation. Any doubts or clarifications? It's open.
No questions for me. Just a great presentation. Looks like there's a lot of things you can do with this.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Okay. So Bharath, is that it then? Can we wrap up then?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Thank you everyone for attending, and we'll upload the videos soon, and hope to catch you at the next session. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to present this.
Thanks, Bharath. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.